So the title of the book is Understanding Roots, Discover How to Make Your Garden Flourish. Now most people who are listening to me have probably planted a tree, a shrub, or a vegetable. So they may be wondering, well, what am I going to talk about? Well, I'm going to talk about some of the concepts of root growth that you may not have heard of. And if we can learn more about roots, we can get better plants and we can help our garden flourish. So the important word in the title really is the word flourish. A lot of people are not aware of how big a root system can be. This is a single kidney bean, the root system of the top 6 inches looking down from above. And it's basically over 4 feet, close to 4 feet in all directions, one single plant. So that root systems explore far more soil than a lot of people give them credit for. But it all begins with the litter. The litter in the forest, on the top, the slightly decomposed material beneath the duff, and then the soil. And what's so important about the soil in the forest is that it's extremely vital to have the top 2 to 4 inches in a very good form because the plants prefer that amount of soil. In other words, the pot on the left is soil gathered from the forest in the 1 to 2 inch zone. The pot in the middle is soil only from the 2 to 4 inch zone, and the one on the right is the subsoil. So you can see that even in the top 2 inches is a radically different amount of growth compared to the 2 to 4 inch zone. So we'll be seeing how important the aerobic layers are as we go through the presentation. But keep this in mind that the top 2 inches is about 50% more growth than gathering soil just from the 2 to 4 inch zone. So let's look at some of the myths of roots and how we can understand those myths, correct them, and get better plants. First guideline is that roots grow way beyond the canopy or the drip line. Many people think that the roots grow primarily out to the drip line, and that's the best place to put water, compost, mulch, etc. In reality, we see it in this chart that the roots can be half again wider than the foliage in a heavy soil, 3 times wider than the foliage in a loamy soil, and believe it or not, in a soil that forces the roots near the surface, a very heavy clay, where the roots may not be able to go very deep at all, the root system can be 5 times wider or greater than the canopy. This is because it's trying to get enough cubic volume of soil to explore. It can't go deep when it's a heavy clay, so it has to go far and wide to gather those nutrients. And here's the fascinating thing of people try to protect trees in our area during construction with these orange fences. And they put the fence down out to about the drip line thinking, well, they're protecting the tree. Well, they are protecting the trunk from damage, but in reality the area beyond the fence is where there's more feeding roots than the area inside the fence. So it becomes kind of an irony that in an attempt to protect the tree, they're forcing the heavy equipment to work right in the area where we find the most feeding roots. Here we see on this drawing done by a Russian that the apple tree has a drip line in the red circle, and the roots extend far beyond that circle. Each square is 1 meter, so you can see that going to the lower left-hand corner is close to 2 meters further out from the foliage, and so that the apple tree is gathering its nutrients from lots of different areas, but also it's not completely symmetrical because of soil type. Soil type has a great big influence on how the roots grow, so we have to keep that in mind as we go through the presentation. Here's an example. The roots up here in the top are going beyond that dotted line. That's the canopy. This is a sandy soil, but where in the bottom it's a loamy soil, and so that you see that the root system in the loamy soil in this particular situation, not very many roots are growing out beyond the foliage. But in a sandy soil, we get a lot of growth beyond the foliage. And part of the reason is this is a dwarfing rootstock called M4 used with apple trees. And it keeps the root system a little bit more constrained compared to other rootstocks. So the rootstocks have a big influence on how fruit trees grow and where the roots grow beyond the foliage. Here we see another drawing from Russia, and the fruit trees again have a drip line in red, and we see that each square is a meter, and the roots grow extremely far away from the canopy on this apple, but they avoid the road and the compaction of the road, so we can see that the trees are responding to the poor quality of compacted soil. Now, a lot of people think that all trees have a taproot. Well, here's an example of an oak tree that does have a taproot. In this case, a majority of the roots are in the surface, but the taproot goes down close to a little over 8 feet. In this, on the left, is the measuring bar, and this is in centimeters, and about 31 centimeters to a foot. So if we go up here at 40 centimeters, we see that a huge proportion of the roots are above 40 centimeter mark, so that we find that even though there's a deep taproot, there's a large number of roots spreading out sideways in the top foot of the soil, and you can see the closer you get to the surface, the more roots you have. Another important part of this illustration is that look how small the tree is relative to the roots. What the plant looks like above ground is no indication whatsoever of what's going on below ground. So we will have trees that are very large, but their root system will oftentimes be much wider than the foliage. So there are about 2% of all the trees have taproots. Usually it's oaks, pines, and nut trees are the biggest category of trees with taproots. Here's another of the same oak in a different soil, so the root system is not nearly as deep. The taproots are more divided, but again, the shallow roots at the top spread quite wide and have a large majority of the root system above the taproot. You can see in the drawing the little acorn and how it developed a taproot right off the beginning to get it established. But as it gets established, the laterals that go to the side develop, and you can have then the kind of root system that likes to be in an aerobic environment. So the reason these roots are growing sideways is, in part, is due to the fact that they want to use the aerobic soils because that's where you get the most rapid release of nutrients. So that all the critters that like to release nutrients like an aerobic environment, and that's in the surface of the soil, so the roots are exploring the soil volume where those things like to live.
To view the full webinar, please join ELA at www.ecolandscaping.org/membership. We look forward to your membership soon. All webinars in the Focus on Sustainability webinar series are available free to ELA members. You can join ELA today at www.ecolandscaping.org/membership. We look forward to having your membership soon.